we're in a group of 1,000 people, but we're completely alone. And that is the disease that is plaguing our society of inauthenticity, that creates and makes creating connection a literal impossibility.
This meeting is being recorded. Rowan, Garlow, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me here.
good. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us in Banana Land. I've got Rowan Garlow here, who she and I have known each other for a long time, and we just recently kind of reconnected. I was learning about ayahuasca, and I just said, have you ever had an experience with ayahuasca? And
I was happy to lend my perspective.
yeah, and it was great. It really was like exactly what I was looking for. Something that I was talking to my buddy about, the idea of conscious versus subconscious or unconscious desires. An example is like my conscious desire is to, I want to be fit, I want to go work out and whatever. My unconscious desire or my subconscious desire, probably more of an unconscious desire, I guess, is to do nothing and eat a lot of really rich foods and things like that. So the sort of difference between conscious desires and unconscious desires, I think we have there's a battle going on between those, and the one that's going to win a lot of the time is the subconscious, it seems like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's only a battle happening because we're not paying attention. And that's why it's relegated to the subconscious. So when you pay attention to that thing, there's no need for it to continue to act out in subconscious and very strong ways, because we're actually feeding something with the same amount of energy that we would be feeding it if we were paying attention to it versus when we're suppressing it. It's actually the same amount of energy. So
Hmm.
that does that make sense?
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
So for example, like with what you were talking about, like there's a part of me that really wants to work out, that and wants to be fit and healthy. This is the part that I'm conscious of. This is what I think that I desire. But when you really look at my life and you are a fly on the wall, you see that what I'm actually committed to and what I actually desire is, let's say, safety. And so a lot of my choices and stuff are going to line me up with safety. Well, if I'm not aware that that's happening and I just keep focusing on, like, I really think I'm committed to this other thing, I'm still feeding this with the same amount of energy because I'm not even paying attention to it. It's like a
Hmm.
starving child. Like if you just ignore it and ignore it, it will just keep festering and get stronger and stronger. So when we're dealing with the subconscious, it's kind of difficult because it's what we don't know that we don't know about ourselves.
Right.
And that's why we have to be able to step away for a minute and see this more objective, like, wait, what is it that I'm actually doing? What is it that I'm actually committed to? And then not demonizing that thing. Like, okay, so there's a part of me that's really dedicated itself to safety. So what's going on? How does this part of me feel unsafe? How can I create safety consciously so that it's
Hmm.
not running the show when I'm not having any clue that I'm actually feeding it, and it's really not
Yeah.
getting its needs met, which is why it keeps acting out.
Yeah. And that term "running the show" I think is perfect. It really is, because I, what I noticed of my younger self, especially, my subconscious desires were. It's like it was like I suppressed them and suppressed them and suppressed them, and then eventually, of course, with enough pressure, sneaks out over here and it sneaks out over there, and those are the things that kind of ended up sort of sabotaging a lot of the better things that I had going. Um, and
Yeah.
the whole time,
Well,
I didn't
what's
even want to admit that they were there.
yeah, what's interesting is that our primary selves will always feel like it's a sabotage. So when we
Mm-hmm.
hear the word sabotage coming from anyone, we know that we're talking about, or to, a primary self that feels like its ambition or what it had planned got ruined by another part within the system.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk to the other part in the system, who's apparently the saboteur,
Right.
um, usually has a very different perspective. Like, no, I've been shut out for 15 years and I was like, fuck this, I'm over it. And so it finally had its time to take over. And so it doesn't see it at all as a sabotage. And usually, and that's the other thing, that we talk about is that there is no such thing as sabotage, because a part of you will always be doing something because it believes it's in your best interest. We just have to find out what is that best interest. If we're not aware of it, then it's going to feel like sabotage.
Right. Yeah. My religion, when I was kind of in that life, was definitely very much against my subconscious desires, and and absolutely very much at war with each other. And I remember thinking of it as this civil war, right? It was an internal battle, and I don't know. I guess the more that I have let go of all of those rules that came with that, especially when I was a kid, around my, especially my sexuality when I was, because my parents were in the Catholic Church when I was a little kid, and it was, it was just a part of me that I was not allowed to accept. I was definitely not allowed to acknowledge, and for sure not talk about. And that was, it definitely ended up being, I think it was the biggest struggle for me. And so as I've kind of let some of that go, I feel a whole lot less of that struggle, and I feel much more free.
Yes.
So how can we get ourselves to a place? Let me ask this first. What's the best way to recognize your, I guess, your subconscious, or your, what some people would call your darkness?
Okay, so this is a point. Well, first I wanted to touch on the religion thing just for a second and say
Absolutely.
that the reason why so many people are tortured in the way that you're talking about, where these parts of themselves later come out or are created in the process, really, of the programming that is religion in general, it's so incredibly polarizing. And so in some ways it can be a really, I hate to say positive thing for people that come out of it, because um like myself, I've been able to recognize, oh, this is just another example of how we're recreating and continuing to recreate this good versus evil and dark versus light, and how integration is really talking about this gray area.
Right.
um but okay, so what you were saying, so I actually wrote down before we started this, because I wanted to talk about what is dark. What are we calling dark, and what is darkness? Because sometimes some people, when you ask them what is darkness, they're thinking it's bad, it's things that are bad, that are evil. And then other times you might think it's the unconscious or the subconscious. And I think that it's interesting that these two things kind of end up happening together, this association with bad or evil and what's unknown or
Mm-hmm.
is in the subconscious. And it's for a reason, because no part of yourself would be unknown unless there was a reason for you to not know that thing. And so that's part of what happens if we're just talking about, a developing human. That's part of what happens is we're sort of this intact being, and then the process of socialization basically causes us to fracture off from what we would see as bad things that are not acceptable. It's depending on what you're raised with, what your rules are. Either this is acceptable or it's not acceptable. And if who you are doesn't fit into what is not acceptable or what is acceptable, um, then you're basically, you're going to risk social survival. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to split off from that thing. And this is where it gets relegated to the subconscious. So it doesn't mean that it stops existing as a part of your personality or as a part of your being, but that now you're just not going to be consciously aware of it, because it actually doesn't serve you to be consciously aware of it. It could kill you to continue to um, be aware of an aspect of yourself that basically makes you dangerous to survive within a family system.
So let me
So
clarify real quick. So you're talking about social survival. You're talking about like staying within the group as a way of social survival?
Yes,
Okay.
because that's the primary need for all physical humans is to socially survive.
Mm-hmm.
So because we're developing at such a slow rate compared to all other mammals, we require our caregivers to basically be on our side. And so, from an evolutionary perspective, we'll do absolutely everything that we can to make sure that we maintain that connection with our caregiver. And if a caregiver says, you know, it's not okay for you to be jealous of your brother like that. Don't be jealous. It's bad. You know, you're going to learn very quickly jealousy is bad. You better push that thing away from yourself so that you can stay close with mom and dad or you're going to fucking die.
Right. Yeah.
That's really just wired into us.
Hmm.
So I think that's an important like framework to put down when we talk about the subconscious and what is good versus bad, because this framework of socialization is what tells us what's good and what's bad. And oftentimes it's so deeply programmed that you're like, well, how am I supposed to know about the things that I don't know that I don't know? So
Right. Yeah.
there's two sides of this. You know, we disown really positive qualities and we disown really negative qualities. And so the quickest way to get to know what you don't know about yourself is to look at your relationships and to look at what is happening in those relationships. So what am I averted to with the people that are around me? What do I really not like about them? What's not going well? That'll tell you a lot about what's happening internally. So you can guarantee that if that person out here is pulling away from you and you're like, I can't seem to, like, whatever the situation is, you've got a part inside that feels the same way. You're doing that to yourself.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like a hack or a cheat code because we know that this internal and the external are going to mirror each other. So first look at your relationships to look at what things are basically screaming at you, because our parts are very clever. They will our system
Right.
is very clever.
Yeah.
This universe is very clever. And at so many levels, we're in the process of becoming aware of ourselves for many reasons beyond just the human, consciousness.
So you said that we disown aspects of ourselves that are very positive. Is that what you said?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So there's a couple different ways that we do that. Sometimes we woefully disown something, and sometimes it it basically would be like I can give you a personal example. So my parents, when I was younger, they said you can only do one activity. You can either play a musical instrument or you can dance. You have to pick one.
Okay.
And so in that moment, I chose dance. And in that moment, what I felt at a being level was, okay, well, the part of you that really wants to play this French horn, we don't get to do that. So you just need to go away. But that was a quality that could have been really awesome. I mean, I could have been a whole part of me that blossomed into a musician. Well, what ended up happening was my whole life, I was like, I'll never date musicians. I don't understand it. People would play the guitar and I would be like, honestly, it just makes me feel sick. Like, I don't even know. It was just this weird, and I
Huh.
really didn't pay it much attention. I was just like, not impressed. Like, not
Okay. Yeah.
impressed, folks. Didn't get it. Didn't understand it.
All
And
right.
then I recently met a person who plays the drums, and the drums was actually also an instrument that I at one point wanted to play. And anyway, so I was able to start to, like, because of where I'm at, start to re-own, okay, like maybe I should pay attention to this. Maybe there's a part of me that really still wants to do this. And it's like, whoa, I opened up. And so whenever you feel that like cringing or like resistance towards something, especially if it's like a positive quality, like, oh, this musician or this artist, or that's something that you woefully disowned. So
Mm.
you had to disown it, but you really didn't want to. Um, and also when we stuff away these inner child parts of ourselves, like, yeah, they might have had a lot of pain, but they also had a lot of gifts, like wonder for the world and presence and who knows? You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't even know what's going to be in there.
yeah. That's interesting. That is really interesting. I think I always had jealousy. For me, it was like, seeing people who could just be themselves. It was like, oh man, I want that so bad, and I think for me, it started. So I've always had like body image issues. I was like the fat kid when I was in eighth grade. So, and I got just ruthlessly just bullied like
Mm.
crazy. So I would, anytime I saw people, um, I don't know, the old fat guy at the beach who's just letting it all hang out and having a great time, I was like, oh man, I want that, like, there was just something about that was really admirable to me. And then I saw this thing one day. It was just a photo, on Facebook, and it just had a quote that said, "The meaning of life is becoming who you are." And it was like, man, that hit me. It really stuck with me. And it really made me, some once in a while you'll hear one thing, one little quote that just, bam, it just does it. And that was kind of it inspired me to think about who am I really, who am I on a level beyond what I want everybody else to see,
Mm.
and all this
Hmm.
stuff, all beyond my act, my facades that I put on, so that I can impress this person and be liked by this person and be admired by this person and respected by someone else. So, yeah, that was
Yeah,
a
I
deep
love
dive for
that.
me. But so let's see. So I actually had written down a couple things here. I've noticed that my subconscious feelings, and this is, I guess, the only place that I'm really drawing from is dreams, but my subconscious feelings, desire for connection, freedom. I have like flying dreams all the time, and they're awesome. It is. Have you ever had a flying dream?
I have a different experience with flying dreams,
What do you
but
got? Do you want to tell me?
yeah, well, mine are usually, for the longest time, I couldn't have them. And then I started lucid dreaming and trying to figure it out. And I was only able to shoot extremely fast up. And then there was always a terror of falling. So
Okay.
there was a lot of meaning encoded in this ability to shoot very high up, but this fear of falling. And so I worked with different things like creating a ceramic tile jungle gym in the sky that I could land on so that I could have a halfway point or something.
Huh.
All kinds of ways that our brain and our subconscious tries to work through
Yeah, right.
stuff.
So how did you go about, when you started to lucid dream? Sounds like that was an intentional process. How'd you do that?
Um, yeah, for me, it was more just like literally setting an intention of, okay, I want to do it. And then throughout the day I would do like the little exercises like I'm awake right now. I'm awake right now. And then in my dream, for me it was hands.
Okay.
I would look at my hands sometimes, or if I was driving a car, I would just veer off the road really quickly, and if I survived, then I knew that I
That
was
is
dreaming.
terrifying. That, of course, I guess if you know you're awake, you're not gonna do it, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
so mine was a whole lot safer than that. I read about this thing. So when I was either a junior or a senior in high school, I wrote this long essay about dreaming, and so I learned this technique where it's like you look at something, you read it, you look away, you look back. Is it still there? Does it still say something? Does it say the same thing? Is it backwards, upside down? All this stuff. If there are any differences, then that kind of cues you into that you're dreaming. And it's a
Hmm.
constant practice. You have to keep doing it. I mean, I did it, I don't even know, 30 times a day during this, sort of research period for this paper, so that eventually, when I was dreaming, just out of habit, I look at the thing. Of course, I'm going to look back. It says the same thing. Oh my gosh, it says something different. It's happening. It was like this really, kind of exciting experience. But that was one of the first times that I just sort of like levitated myself up off the ground. And then, and ever since then, it's just been like I've sort of experimented with how far I can go. And actually, oddly enough, like, maybe a week and a half ago, I dreamt that I went to the outer edge of the Milky Way. so I could actually see the, all the, and I mean, it was like Technicolor, but I mean, I could actually see all the, all of the Milky Way in front of me. It was pretty amazing actually. But
So you were saying that the main things you've noticed from your dreams that you're interested in are freedom.
yeah,
What else were you saying?
so desire for connection, freedom, and a total lack of responsibility, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
I can do anything. There are no consequences to my actions, and so like I can go anywhere that I want,
Yeah.
and and then on the conscious side of things, and these are things that are like I feel a bit of freedom in my life. I feel some financial freedom. I feel some freedom to be, to say the things that I really do think, especially around certain people. I have a little bit of freedom to really connect with people in a way that, I mean, it's got to be appropriate and it's got to be all this stuff where like there are some times when I just want to hug someone for 30 seconds, just, I mean, and it's totally socially unacceptable to just, where they're like, okay, all right, it's like it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's socially unacceptable until you find the people who can consciously connect with you
Yeah, yeah. So on the
in a way where you're
conscious,
like, I can state my needs and be like, I want to hug for 30 seconds or 30 minutes,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
So on the conscious side, impatience, jealousy, stress, and expectancy. So, and I mean, of course, there are a lot of things consciously that are, you know, that I think are pretty healthy. But these are the things that don't really bleed over into each other as much. So,
So,
yeah, good.
so my advice would be that if somebody is, getting to the point where they're now aware of something in their subconscious that's um, now becoming conscious, like, oh, I'm experiencing a lot of jealousy, and this is something that I really didn't want to see about myself or that I think is bad, but I don't know what to do with it, is to start to release resistance to that thing in as many ways as possible. So that can include writing a list for some people of all of the ways that having that is actually a positive thing for them. So that's kind of loosening up some of that glue and getting them into the perspective of the part of them that really does feel those things, because the more acceptance and validation that you can have for that part, the easier it's going to be to connect with it, and then you can start to understand where that came from, create some resolve for that part of yourself, and there's various processes out there that can do that. And then really healing is experiencing the opposite of whatever created that thing, and also being able to, when you integrate that thing, it's no longer expressing the negative qualities anymore. So that's part of shadow work is, okay, so we find this thing, now we integrate jealousy. Does that mean we're never going to feel jealousy again? Absolutely not. But it means we have a different relationship with jealousy. The jealousy is not going to hijack our system and hijack our decisions. It's more like a working relationship with, okay, I understand why this emotion exists, why it's here. How can I tend to it like a child that needs me? What does it need? Those kind of things. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to state that.
Okay. So you said release resistance, and I just wanted to clarify. So you're talking about basically embracing your jealousy, or embracing your, what else is in here? Impatience or stress or expectancy, those things.
Yeah.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
is a healthy relationship with jealousy?
I think that would depend on the person. But for the most part, a healthy relationship with it would be where it's not running your life.
Yeah.
Like let's have an example of, so we can get specific about, let's say, like, what level are we talking about, and what would be because there would be like a very clear path of healing for a person, depending on, like, if they're dealing with jealousy within romantic relationships, then you really have to be dealing with the inner child that feels what's underneath the jealousy, feels insignificant, feels worthless, feels
Potential abandonment, things like that. Yeah.
abandoned. Yeah, sure. And then really resolving and working with those things instead of, because a lot of times what happens with and jealousy is also like a very primary emotion
Mm-hmm.
too. So we have to be careful to not like say, oh, it's always coming from trauma. But if it's really extreme, if it feels like a really chronic and extreme thing, then usually, yeah, we're talking about coming from trauma. But like shame, for example, jealousy, those are all very natural responses. Especially jealousy happens when a person doesn't feel capable of creating that thing for themselves. So you have to deal with like underlying
Mm.
powerlessness and stuff like that. And that's helping to release the resistance because you're tending to that thing now. It's no longer pulling on where you're trying to go.
Yeah. So I recently, well, somewhat recently, had an experience where I would say, at least over the last 10 years, I experienced more jealousy than I have in the past decade. And I do think, like what you said, it really struck a chord with me because it was like, it was over my relationship, and I do have a sense. I mean, like, it's my relationship is so good. It's just so, I don't know. It's so good. We laugh a lot. We really understand each other well, and we communicate well, and we can talk about ideas and all this stuff. And I do have a little bit of a feeling that like, I don't know if I could recreate that in another relationship.
Mm.
So so that feeling of, I guess, a little bit of, I don't know if I, yeah, maybe helplessness. Maybe like if I lose this, that it'll always be the one that got away.
Right.
So, and
Because
that
there's
definitely triggered
a
that feeling.
feeling of, yeah, a feeling of powerlessness to be able to have that again. Because it's already coming from a space of lack. It's coming from a space of like, I can't create it. It won't happen.
Mm,
And so that part's really focused on the loss and the really not wanting to lose
yeah.
the connection. Yeah.
Hmm.
Which totally makes sense if you've been through rejection or abandonment trauma.
Hmm. That is interesting. Really interesting. So the thing that I noticed about these, like, conscious and subconscious desires sort of being at war is, so I can connect intellectually with other people. I can connect on a humor level with other people, but especially sexually, I can only connect with my partner. So anytime that there's any kind of thought about anything else, um, so my ego, my conscious desire, or my conscious feeling of jealousy, puts that sort of feeling onto Sierra, let's say, and and so then that's where I get to like, well, I wouldn't want that. So I've got this sense of jealousy that I know about, and I don't want her to have to feel that. And so, so I'm going to sort of temper all of that stuff accordingly, out of protection for her.
So when you talk about the way that you've compartmentalized
Right. Yeah.
these things, there's sort of two different things happening because on the one hand, it's very healthy and natural to know what people in our lives are filling what roles
Mm-hmm.
and what compatibility lies where. Like I know I'm really compatible with this person on a mental level, really compatible with this person on a physical level. This person we kind of have a mix of both, you know. And so you're getting the needs met in a really conscious way, and that can be good. But there's also, it sounds like, a part of you that is really having to control, like it's like, and then we're only doing this here, and then here we're only allowed to, with these people we're only allowed to fit within this particular box. But that's all decided by the individual and how much they're willing to speak up about what they need and how much they're willing to alter the relationships that they're in. Because if you talk to, let's say, a friend, and you're like, it'd be really nice for me if we could expand this friendship in this way, or I don't know, there's just like it's sort of up to us to either decide what people are going to consciously fill what roles for us, or if there's a part that's saying I feel like I'm having to really split myself up and be inauthentic and sort of keep myself in check with each group, that there's no real cohesion between an authentic self that's able to show up the same way in every situation. And that's sort of what integration is hopefully integrating those pieces so that the people out here, we can really fully show up in the way that we want to.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a whole lot of inauthenticity just all around, and I think I do think it's the inauthenticity of other people that makes us scared to be scared to be truly authentic ourselves. However, what I really have noticed is like the more authentic I'm willing to be, it's like it gives other people permission. And I,
Yes.
so, and I've been around a few people in my life who are just so there. They're just so, I don't know how to put this, but they're just so authentically them. You know that you're getting the same thing that everybody else is getting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being around those people for the first time, starting when I was probably 25, changing experience. Absolutely, it made it so that I was like, okay, so I can kind of let my hair down here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and honestly, one of those people was just super open. She's this really, she makes really good choices, but she's just very open. Another one of them just made terrible choices, and so like I didn't feel judged by her because she had no room to judge, and but both of them gave the result of this very authentic relationship where we could talk about anything, we could be completely real with each other. So I'm wondering, do you have any advice as far as how we can create those types of relationships all around our circle of influence? And I mean,
Yeah.
when I say that, I'm talking about the circle that influences us, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is to start to change like how we have a relationship with authenticity, because to be inauthentic is really doing ourselves and every relationship the most huge disservice. It's not to say that like it doesn't make perfect sense why people are inauthentic. It makes perfect sense why people are inauthentic. But if we are showing up and we're not being authentic, then not only are we we're literally setting people up to be duped by us,
Hmm. Yeah.
because we show up as one thing, and eventually all your parts will come out. Everything will come out one way or the other. If it's not this month, it'll be next year. And so then this is what happens in so many relationships is then people feel like, dude, this is not the person. And of course people change, but there's a huge difference between a person really authentically changing and a person actually just revealing what's been
Right.
there the whole time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wait, this isn't what I thought I was getting myself into.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we were to really just show up, like, we would know very quickly what relationships were compatible for us and which relationships were not. And we would know where the compatibility actually lied. Otherwise, we're just entering into relationships for the sake of a relationship at all.
Right.
We're not actually looking at genuine compatibility. And then you're not having a relationship. That's not a relationship. So people have to really understand and come to a place within themselves where it's like, what do you want? Do you want to actually have a relationship with a person, which is the real showing up with all of your shit? Or would you rather have a relationship with somebody but you're not actually feeling connected at all? It's like the whole chronic issue within the human race where we're in a group of 1,000 people but we're completely alone, and that is the disease that is plaguing our society of inauthenticity that creates and makes creating connection a literal impossibility.
Yeah.
if you want real connection and you want community, then show up as yourself, because the people who don't resonate with you will drop off very quickly, and the people who do will show up. So yay, that's great news.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just had a I have an idea about this actually. I just recently got back in touch with my dad for the first time in probably close to 10 years. I was pretty convinced I would never talk to him again. We both had some, we both had some pretty bitter feelings toward each other, because of how things went through my childhood. I really didn't respect him. He obviously he wanted to be respected, and that, I didn't give him that at all, and he was, kind of abusive and things like that. So after a after a 10-year stint of non-communication, we got back in touch, and I think what I have experienced with that, he and we're very close now. Like, we talk regularly, we talk about ideas. I have no mask on with him. I don't have to worry about, I don't have to change my speech. I don't have to change my ideas. I don't have to, I don't have to change my beliefs when when I'm talking to him. And I think that all that has to do with that I kind of mourned the death of our relationship already. So going back into it,
Mm,
I had this sense that, like, well, if it works out, great. And if not, okay. And I've never had that
yeah,
with a family member before. And I think because I have had that with him, we can both just be completely ourselves. And
yeah,
it's
it
so
makes a lot of
refreshing.
sense.
Yeah, and I don't have that with my mom. My relationship with her is very guarded. There are several topics I know we just don't talk about, and I kind of wonder, like, will I ever be as close with her? I would love to be, because she's wonderful. She really is an amazing woman, but I just don't feel free to be myself. I do have a sense that if I was completely authentic with my mom, like, she knows that I own a vape shop, and that was a struggle. That was tough for me to tell her, hey, so I'm starting the vape shop, because she thinks, vaping is smoking, and smoking is bad, and all of that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so maybe that has something to do with it. Like, in the same way that you can sort of experience your own ego death, you can sort of mentally go through what it means to die in sort of a preparation for life, and once you actually go through the mental exercise of that, then it's like life becomes possible in a way that it never was before. So maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, it it seems like there's sort of, I'm hesitant to say that creating a disattachment or like unattaching in a way to a relationship is a way to be fully authentic, because I don't think that that would be like sending people a very good message. But in a way, when you're sort of, the positive side of that is when you are secure in yourself as a person, to the degree that if I am going to lose this individual, whoever they are, I'm still going to be intact. What I still stand for, who I still am, is still going to hold. Then I think that there's a level of freedom that you can have to express yourself authentically, because but you don't even get to a place of that level of authenticity until you've even accepted all of those parts of yourself and really integrated them. Otherwise, you're going to still be afraid that you're going to be rejected, or something's bad with you or wrong with you, which I think we're all still processing, to some degree or another.
Yeah. So I think with my dad, it was not so much mourning the death of the relationship. It was
Mm,
the thing that came with that. The thing that came with that was the complete abandonment of expectation. I had no
mm,
expectation for what was going to happen with him, and so because of that, there was this brand new
yeah.
space to create that had never been there before. It was so it was so clouded with stuff from the
Mm.
past that I couldn't get over, stuff from the past that he couldn't get over, apologies that were made and made and made and never stuck, and forgiveness that was
Yeah.
offered and offered and offered and never stuck, and things like that. When once we both sort of had no real expectations for it, that's when we really started moving forward.
Yeah, well, because you're releasing resistance in that moment, you're saying, and it's really something that a lot of, like, I've had to do, like, okay, what can I actually expect from this person? And usually people have a track record, and you can expect certain things from certain people. And once I did that with my parents, it definitely lessened a lot of the suffering because I was in reality. And I'm like, okay, this
Mm.
is what I can expect from them, which lessens the pain of not getting a need met from them.
Yeah.
But I think oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say we spend a whole lot of time not in reality. I feel like
Yes.
it's wild. Reality, by the way, right now, so bizarre. I mean, I think it's, so when you talk about really fully, diving into like your jealousy or your anger or whatever it is, like we as a culture, we are really, really doing that right now. And I think there's a lot to be learned from this, but so, so weird. So, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit too, as far as like I don't know. I guess actually the other thing that comes up when when I search about integration is racial integration. And oddly enough, did you see the
Mm.
thing that's happening in Chaz right now? One of the things. So they have there's a community garden, the the produce of which is only for black people. And so it's racial segregation in Chaz. I mean, it's just one small example of racial segregation, which is really, really bizarre to me. So I guess, I don't know. I wonder where we're going to go as far as, I mean, it seemed for a long time like we were sort of integrating as a society more and more, and racism was kind of not as prevalent, and
Yeah,
now
but
it
it
seems
only
like it's.
seemed like that on a very surface level. That wasn't actually the reality of it.
You don't think so?
No,
Okay.
no. I think that a lot of what's happening right now is about people. It's not a bad thing that people are becoming aware to the degree that they are becoming aware, where it feels like it's like, whoa, maybe things, maybe it seemed like things had died down, but things never died down. They were as bad as they've ever been. And right now there's a little bit of a control to make us even more aware of that right now. And that's a really positive thing because it's dredging up things that people need to look at, that we as a culture and as a society need to look at. But the process of integration is not a linear process. And so things like even healing, just at a macro level, things will get much worse before they'll get better. And unfortunately, that's just has a lot to do with the state of our consciousness. We have made a slow and steady increase towards awareness. I really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're going backwards in awareness, but I think in order to get to a more integrated space as a whole human race, we're looking at a long time. So this is really just a very important blip on the trajectory for our integration and
Yeah.
coming to a place where we really are taking each other as a part of ourselves, because that needs to happen on every front.
Yeah. So I think a lot of what I've seen, I mean, I am kind of wondering, are there people who have been sort of on the fence who could have gone either way? Like, maybe it's the white person who hasn't had enough experience with black people, Hispanics, and Asians, and so they may have had a couple of good experiences, and they're like, okay, well, maybe, even though maybe despite what my parents said, they're not all bad after all. And
Sure.
I wonder how many people this stuff that's happening right now is pushing back onto that side of the fence of sort of racism, you know.
Hmm. You mean pushing them back in the direction of?
Of racism.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just wonder
Well,
if that's how.
I would think that in some ways what's happening has pushed people into a direction of seeing and amplifying the division or hatred or fear, because really that's the opposite. Fear is the opposite of connection. So what's happening is amplifying the fear and disconnection that was already there.
Hmm.
So it's really nothing new. Even though it might be new for the individual, it might have a new flavor, it might, but it's really just like it was there. It's just, did you poke it? You
Right.
poked it, and so now it's coming to the surface.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely I could see that. You know, it just being a sort of a sleeping hornet's nest, I guess.
Yeah, and whether it's about race or you know, if you just pull back from even that, there's still division. Even if a person doesn't identify themselves as being racist, which most people don't, even if they have racist, you know, tendencies, um, but that there's still this othering happening, and
Mm-hmm.
this othering is happening within ourselves. It's happening all day long. So just becoming aware of that othering and that like this internal war that we're talking about, that's why it's so awesome to talk about what we're talking about, because this is people's axis of power, is with themselves.
Right.
Of course, yes, do all of the things out here too, you need both, but if you really want to transform something, transform the internal parts that are pointing at each other, and watch, you know, watch the subtle ways that we're othering out here.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I recently just did a post that ended with change is a one person thing, and I mean it was just something that sort of hit me in the moment. But I really, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I can't change. You know, I can't change other people's minds. I can try to introduce other people to different concepts outside of their purview. Um, but I think a whole lot of the problem right now, the echo chamber effect that's happening, and we're causing it more and more all the time. It's not so we've got the echo chambering that's happening with all of the algorithms, where like, you know, we're always fed more of what we're looking for. But also with our social media groups, we're weeding out people who it's like, well, you don't agree enough, and I don't like what you said here. So we're just like taking these people out of our, you know, out of kind of the tapestry that could be happening. The problem there is that they are no longer able to influence us, and we are no longer able to influence them. And so like I've really been trying to put a focus lately on keeping my, you know, keeping that all intact, no matter how much I disagree with something that someone's saying. I made
Mm.
myself a challenge to start. So I noticed that if you've got a thread where there are three people on one side and three people on the other side of an issue, it'll be like comment from group 1 with 2 likes, comment from group 2 with 2 likes, comment from group 1 with 2 likes. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and it's obviously the other two people and the other two people over here, and we're all just supporting each other's sides, but it's very polarizing. And I think that there is, so anyway, my challenge for myself was to just start, I'm going to put a thumbs up on your comment, whatever it is, no matter how much I disagree with it. I am thumbs upping that you said it. You know, that you went out on a limb to actually put your idea out there to be to be scrutinized, and in a
Yeah.
manner, you know, in a forum that could be argued with. I like that. You know, um, so anyway, yeah. I can't remember where I was going with that. Doesn't matter.
I mean, I think it's good for people to be having those conversations. But one of the things that I like to do is, and I like what you're saying about thumbs upping both sides, because that's a way to get, you know, more approval or acceptance of whatever is being said, which is ultimately a perspective. You don't have to doesn't have to be your perspective. But one of the things that I do is I'll just sort of be like an observer, or look at a thread like that and just see what might be happening, like where the different perspectives are, what the different values are. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with that, you're just dealing with people that are in completely different realities.
Mm-hmm.
And so where one person is standing, it would be like trying to argue about a tent that you're looking at, but one person's looking at a tent in New York and the other person's looking at a tent in Los Angeles. You're not even looking at the same fucking tent, so you can't even have a conversation about it. So that's sort of the issue, that it's like I'm talking at you from my reality, but I'm not really joining your reality.
Yeah.
And it can be very, very challenging to join certain realities on this planet, because they could seem threatening to our ego or to a part of us, to even go there. But a lot of times, if we really want to connect with that person, which a lot of, like for myself, there's a lot of people that I just don't want to connect with, honestly. And that's actually a really healthy and healing thing for me to do. But if I wanted to connect with that person and actually create some sort of exchange that was healthy, then I would have to be willing to join them, which means I would have to be willing to disidentify with my own perspective long enough to even step into a different reality like that.
Yeah. Which is, that's how we grow. Honest to goodness. I think that is, it might be the only way to grow, to actually look at your position from outside of your position, if you can. Which it's so hard. It's so hard to do that, like giving the other side a shot is really tough. Man, yeah. So, Rowan Garlow, how do we fix the world? What's the answer? Just give us, just spell it out real quick. We'll put the answer out there, and the world will be better. I'm going to put you on a 6-month timeline, okay? That should be more than enough.
My God. Yeah. Well, I think everything that we talked about in this podcast, and looking at reowning the things that might be difficult to look at, or might be difficult to consider, to take in as part of ourselves. I think that's one thing. And it's not like this horrible process, because like I've said, you get the great parts of it. So when it's integrated, when you integrate that, like, psychopath or the attacker or the predator or whatever it is, you don't become a predator. You become the alchemized version of what that is, which is maybe strong and stable and whatever, So it's a really, integrating the darkness can be one of the most fulfilling and like actually positive things.
Yeah.
Because then, like, less shit out here seems so like huge and horrible, because you're like, oh yeah, that's me. Okay, well, I can relate to it now. Now there's less charge.
Right. Yeah, fear and misunderstanding they are inextricably linked, I think. We're afraid of the things that we don't understand, I think, in the biggest way. Hit me.
I think what Teal always says is we're never afraid of what we don't know. We're always afraid of what we are projecting into the unknown based off of our current life experiences. So always be examining, what is it that I am thinking is going to happen based on this? But we're not afraid of the unknown. We could do the unknown all day. It's just that we think horrible things exist in the unknown.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. I would love to do it again.
Thank you.
Most definitely. I really appreciate your perspective. And do you want to plug your channels and your stuff? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can just find me on YouTube at Rowan Garlow, or my website, rowangarlow.com, or Instagram, Rowan Garlow. So just, that's my fucking name.
Making it easy peasy. I like it. All right, cool. Okay, thanks for joining us in Banana Land, and we'll catch you next time.